So what if Alzheimer's, heart disease, Parkinson's, and, osteoarthritis aren't actually different diseases at all? I mean, what if they are just different symptoms of the exact same biological fire burning inside your cells?
Just a pretty wild concept, yeah.
Right. And more importantly, what if we currently have both cutting-edge miracle drugs in the pipeline and ancient lifestyle practices that can physically reach into those cells and extinguish that fire?
Well, we are looking at a profound shift in how modern biology views the aging process right now. I mean, the focus is moving completely away from just treating those end-stage symptoms.
Mm.
It's pivoting toward addressing the fundamental, universal architecture of human decay.
Which brings us to the mission of this deep dive. We're going to explore this biological villain, a phenomenon scientists now call inflammaging.
Mm-hmm.
And we are going to arm you with the ultimate toolkit to fight it.
Yeah.
To do this, we are pulling from two very different sources on the desk today. The first is a highly technical 2023 clinical review from the pharmaceutical world. It focuses on a new class of experimental drugs called NLRP3 inflammasome inhibitors.
Right, highly technical stuff.
Yeah. And the second is a massive 2026 narrative review from MDPI. And that one details how lifestyle choices, so your diet, your daily movement, and even your stress levels, molecularly dictate the aging of your immune system.
You know, putting these two papers side by side reveals something incredible. One is literally a breakdown of million-dollar lab-synthesized molecules, and the other is talking about, well, the biochemical benefits of fasting and broccoli and yoga.
That's huge contrast.
It is, but they are actually describing two distinct ways to hack the exact same biological pathways. I mean, they're speaking the identical cellular language.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can cure the disease or even evaluate these treatments, we have to understand the mechanism. Like, why does the human body suddenly decide to attack its own tissues as we get older?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. And the 2023 clinical paper uses a historical analogy that I found really helpful. They compare a specific part of our innate immune system to Paul Revere.
Yeah, the Midnight Rider of the American Revolution. It's actually an incredibly apt comparison for how frontline immune cells operate.
Because Paul Revere had that really simple binary early warning system. One if by land, two if by sea. He senses danger, raises the alarm, and wakes everyone up.
Right, he doesn't stick around to fight the British himself. He just screams that they are coming.
Exactly. So inside our cells, specifically inside our macrophages, which are those frontline scavenger cells that patrol our tissues, the molecular equivalent of Paul Revere is a protein complex called the NLRP3 inflammasome.
And what's fascinating here is how it behaves. It sits inside the cell, senses danger, and immediately activates genes to produce a signaling molecule called interleukin-1 beta, or IL-1 beta.
So it basically shouts, "We're under attack," to the rest of the body.
Precisely. But the cellular response, once that specific alarm is tripped, is remarkably extreme. I mean, the inflammasome doesn't just send out a passive distress signal. It initiates a literal, violent self-destruct sequence.
Wait, it blows itself up?
Basically, yeah. It activates an executioner protein called Gasdermin D. And this protein essentially acts like a microscopic drill. It physically pokes holes in the macrophage's own cell membrane from the inside out.
Wow, so the immune cell essentially commits suicide just to warn the others?
Yeah, the scientific term is pyroptosis. It's a highly inflammatory, fiery type of cell death. The cell membrane ruptures, and this violent explosion releases massive amounts of that IL-1 beta into the surrounding tissue.
Which I assume brings in the cavalry.
Right. It instantly recruits a swarm of other immune cells to the area. Now, if you have an acute infection, say a staph infection and a deep cut on your arm, this scorched earth tactic is exactly what you want. It walls off the area and destroys the invading pathogen.
But the sources point out that this scorched earth tactic becomes a total disaster when the alarm won't shut off. And that leads us to the trap of inflammaging.
Exactly.
Because we usually think of inflammation as a response to a virus or a bacteria. But the paper emphasizes that inflammation can be triggered by things that aren't infectious at all, right?
Yeah, things like cholesterol crystals building up in your arteries, or dead cells that haven't been cleared away, or beta amyloid plaques in the brain if we're talking about Alzheimer's.
And they call this sterile inflammation.
Right. The term sterile is used because there is no living pathogen to kill. But the NLRP3 inflammasome, or Paul Revere, well, it doesn't have the nuance to tell the difference between a deadly bacteria and a jagged cholesterol crystal.
It just knows something is wrong.
Exactly. It senses that cellular integrity is breached, something is out of place, and it pulls the alarm anyway.
It's like having a hypersensitive home security system. A piece of dust floats past the motion sensor, the alarm blares, the police show up, kick your front door down, and then accidentally trash your living room trying to find a burglar that was never there.
That is a great way to picture it.
And then the next day, another piece of dust floats by,
Mhm.
and they do it all over again, week after week, year after year.
And that relentless low-grade alarm ringing over decades is the physical embodiment of inflammaging. And the primary culprits floating past that motion sensor, the things driving this false alarm, are senescent cells.
Right. These are the aging cells that have accumulated severe DNA damage.
Yes. Under normal circumstances, a damaged cell will quietly disassemble itself through a programmed non-inflammatory death called apoptosis. But senescent cells bypass that process.
They just refuse to die.
Right, they just sit in your tissues, functioning essentially as zombies.
So they aren't contributing to the tissue anymore. They're just taking up space.
Taking up space and secreting a highly toxic, localized cocktail of chemical garbage. This is known as SAP, or the senescence-associated secretory phenotype.
This ASP sounds nasty.
It is. It's a continuous stream of inflammatory cytokines and reactive oxygen species, and it constantly trips the Paul Revere alarm in neighboring healthy cells, creating this self-sustaining microscopic chain reaction of tissue damage.
Okay, so if this molecular alarm system, this NLRP3 inflammasome, is slowly ruining our tissues over time in response to this garbage, the obvious question is, why don't we just build a targeted molecular switch to turn it off?
Which is exactly what the pharmaceutical industry is trying to do.
Right, and that brings us to the first solution on the table. The 2023 paper introduces these direct NLRP3 inflammasome inhibitors. There's one drug they highlight, RX-001, that sounds almost like science fiction.
It really does. RX-001 is a very unique small molecule. It was originally pulled from the aerospace industry, actually.
Which is crazy on its own. But the paper notes it's currently in phase 3 trials for small cell lung cancer. It's also being studied in conjunction with the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's disease.
Yeah, the applications are incredibly broad.
But the wildest fact is that it's actively on the critical path for FDA approval as a radioprotectant in case of a nuclear war. Like they're looking at a single drug for lung cancer, Parkinson's, and surviving nuclear fallout.
I know it sounds unbelievable, but that overlap highlights a massive paradigm shift in modern medicine. Traditionally, pharmaceutical development operates on a strict one drug, one target, one disease model.
Right, like a statin specifically for cholesterol.
Or an SSRI specifically for depression, exactly. But because chronic sterile inflammation is the root engine driving so many seemingly unrelated pathologies, these inflammasome inhibitors are being evaluated across incredibly diverse medical fields.
They also mentioned OLT-1177 being tested for gout and osteoarthritis, and biologic blockers like canakinumab for cardiovascular disease. I mean, they are studying these inhibitors for over 50 different disease states.
It's a massive undertaking.
But, I have to push back on this massive investment in new drugs.
Yeah.
We already have drugs that turn off inflammation. Glucocorticoids, right? Things like prednisone or hydrocortisone.
That's true, we do.
They were literally hailed as wonder drugs back in the 1950s. Why are we spending billions of dollars to invent complex new off switches when we already have ones that work perfectly well?
Well, glucocorticoids certainly work as incredibly powerful immunosuppressants, but they act as a blunt instrument. They suppress the immune system so broadly that the collateral damage of long-term use is severe.
Like what kind of damage?
Chronic use of prednisone is associated with significant weight gain, severe depression, glaucoma, osteoporosis, and a much higher risk of fatal opportunistic infections.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Going back to your earlier analogy, you're effectively disarming and disbanding the entire police force of your body.
I see. So you stop the house from being trashed by the police responding to the false alarm, but you leave the front door completely unguarded for actual burglars to walk right in.
Exactly. And the promise of the new NLRP3 inhibitors, these 21st century candidates, is their extreme precision. They specifically target that Paul Revere sensor.
So they only stop the false alarms.
Right. They stop the inappropriate sterile inflammation caused by things like cholesterol or zombie cells without broadly paralyzing your macrophage's ability to recognize and fight off a real bacterial or viral infection.
That makes total sense.
And so far, the clinical trials for drugs like OLT-1177 and RRX-001 have shown a highly favorable safety profile because they leave the rest of the immune system intact.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. While these precision miracle drugs are working their way through years of clinical trials and FDA approvals, the 2026 MDPI narrative review reveals something equally staggering.
The lifestyle intervention.
Yeah. You can manipulate these exact same biological pathways, the NLRP3 inflammasome and another major inflammatory pathway called NFB, using what is sitting on your dinner plate right now.
We should probably define NF-key for a moment. Think of it as the master switchboard inside the cell nucleus that controls the production of inflammatory proteins.
Okay, a master switchboard.
When it's activated, it commands the cell to churn out inflammation. The intersection of lifestyle medicine and molecular biology shows us that we aren't just eating well to feel energized. We are using food as biochemical signaling molecules to reach into the nucleus and flip that switchboard off.
That is mind-blowing. Let's look at the vital trial cited in the Lifestyle Review. This was a massive, rigorous study involving over 25,000 adults, and they found that taking just 2,000 IU of vitamin D daily reduced the incidence of all autoimmune diseases by 22%.
Which is a huge deal.
Right, that is a staggering reduction across a population for a simple over-the-counter vitamin.
The mechanism behind that statistic is actually very clear. Vitamin D receptors are physically present on almost all immune cells. When active vitamin D binds to those receptors, it directly inhibits the activation of that NF-key switchboard.
Wait, it literally reaches into the cell nucleus.
It does. It forces the inflammatory genes to stay quiet.
Incredible. And what about fats? Because I always thought of omega-3s and the monounsaturated fats found in extra virgin olive oil as just, heart-healthy lubricants for your blood vessels.
A lot of people think that.
But this paper implies they are doing something deeply structural inside the cell itself, specifically involving the mitochondria.
Yeah, so as we age, the mitochondrial membranes become fragile and begin to lose their structural integrity. They become leaky, and when they leak, they can accidentally spill their own mitochondrial DNA out into the main body of the cell. Now, remember the Paul Revere alarm, the NLRP3 inflammasome?
It's waiting for danger signals.
Exactly. When that inflammasome senses free-floating DNA inside the cell, it panics. It assumes the cell has been invaded by a virus because DNA shouldn't just be floating around loose like that.
Oh man, so it triggers pyroptosis.
Right, but it's a false alarm. It's just the cell's own leaky mitochondria. Omega-3s and monounsaturated fats physically incorporate themselves into those mitochondrial membranes.
So they act like a patch.
Like biological caulk, yeah. Sealing the leaks, making the membranes more fluid and resilient, and preventing the DNA from spilling out and tripping the alarm in the first place.
That structural defense is just incredible. The paper also highlights flavonoids, these compounds found in berries, citrus, spinach, and green tea. Things like quercetin or EGCG.
The intelligent regulators?
Yeah, the authors call them intelligent regulators.
Yeah.
Because they don't just act like a fire blanket putting out inflammation. They actually possess the ability to induce apoptosis, that programmed cell death, specifically in cancer cells and in those zombie senescent cells we talked about earlier.
The process is called senolysis. By inhibiting specific survival pathways that those damaged cells rely on to stay alive, flavonoids essentially convince the zombie cells that it is finally time to die.
Which is exactly what we want.
Exactly. Clearing them out of the tissue stops the continuous leaking of that toxic SASP chemical garbage at the source.
Okay, so we can clear out the metabolic garbage by eating specific foods, but dietary stress, or rather the lack of it, is also a major signaling mechanism. The review brings up caloric restriction, or CR.
A very powerful intervention.
Yeah, in human trials, simply restricting calories significantly dropped C-reactive protein, which is a major marker of systemic inflammation produced by the liver, by 40%. And TNF-alpha, a major inflammatory cytokine, by 50%.
Those are massive drops.
But to play devil's advocate here, if less food equals less inflammation, shouldn't we just radically undereat to live forever?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, biology rarely operates in a straight linear fashion. It usually follows a J-shaped curve.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning a moderate amount of biological stress is highly beneficial, but extreme amounts become destructive. Severe, prolonged caloric restriction in aged mice actually weakened their immune system to the point where it delayed their ability to clear the influenza virus.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they simply lacked the energy reserves required to mount a proper defense.
So it's a delicate balance, not a starvation contest.
Precisely. This is why intermittent protocols like the fasting mimicking diet or FMD are gaining so much traction. FMD involves very low calorie intake for just a few consecutive days a month.
And what does that do?
This brief period of nutrient scarcity causes a sharp drop in your insulin-like growth factor, or IGF-1. That drop in IGF-1 signals the body to initiate a massive die-off of old, damaged immune cells to conserve energy.
Right, getting rid of the dead weight.
But then, when you refeed and the nutrients return, the body wakes up dormant stem cells in the bone marrow to replace the ones it destroyed. It forces the immune system to reboot itself with fresh, functional cells.
So we can clear out metabolic garbage by restricting calories or eating flavonoids. But dietary stress isn't the only thing our immune cells respond to. They are constantly eavesdropping on our psychological state, too.
That's a huge component.
The 2026 paper makes it abundantly clear that our brains have direct chemical lines to our immune system. Let's talk about the HPA axis and the stress response.
Yes, psychological stress is fundamentally not just a feeling. It is a profound physical cascade. When you experience chronic stress, whether from a demanding job, financial worries, or social isolation, your brain continuously activates the HPA axis.
That's the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, right?
Correct. And this activation results in the relentless release of cortisol, which is our primary stress hormone.
But wait, I thought cortisol is supposed to be anti-inflammatory. Like when you put a hydrocortisone cream on a rash to calm it down?
It is in acute short-term bursts. Cortisol is highly anti-inflammatory then. But when it is continuously flooding your system week after week, your immune cells adapt to the overload.
They build a tolerance.
Basically, they physically downregulate their cortisol receptors in a phenomenon called glucocorticoid receptor resistance. They become completely deaf to the body's natural anti-inflammatory signals.
It's like a boss who yells at their employees all day, every day over minor things. Eventually, the employees just put on noise-canceling headphones to block the constant noise.
That's a very accurate comparison.
But then, when the boss yells that the office is actually on fire, nobody listens, and the entire building burns down.
And the building burning down in that scenario is rampant systemic inflammaging, driven by an unchecked NFE switchboard. But the data shows we can consciously reverse this resistance.
How so?
Behavioral interventions, specifically mindfulness-based stress reduction programs and certain yoga practices, actually alter gene expression.
To be clear, sitting quietly and focusing on your breath physically changes your genes.
It changes the expression of your genes. It's a proven epigenetic effect. Studies show that these mindfulness practices reduce the activity of enzymes called histamine deacetylases, or HDACs.
What do HDCs do?
These enzymes control how tightly your DNA is wound up inside the nucleus. By inhibiting HDACs, mindfulness practices physically alter the shape of the DNA, actively downregulating the transcription of pro-inflammatory genes.
So you are turning down the volume knob on inflammation at the deepest genetic level. That is super fascinating.
It really is.
Now, I always assumed physical exercise reduced inflammation simply by helping you lose body fat, which itself is inflammatory. But exercise inherently stresses the body, right?
Yeah.
You are tearing muscle fibers and generating free radicals.
It's a major stressor, yes.
So how does stressing the body out physically actually lower systemic inflammation over the long term?
Well, the mechanism goes far beyond just burning fat. When muscles contract repeatedly during combined training, which is a mix of aerobic cardio and resistance weight training, they release signaling proteins called myokines.
Myokines, okay.
In the specific context of exercise, myokines act as powerful anti-inflammatory signals. Furthermore, exercise actively manipulates something called the kynurenine pathway.
The review spent a lot of time on this pathway. It has to do with how the body processes tryptophan, right?
Correct. Tryptophan is an amino acid most people associate with turkey and feeling sleepy. But under chronic stress, the body metabolizes tryptophan into neurotoxic and highly inflammatory byproducts.
Oh, that's not good.
No, it's not. But combined physical training forces the body to reroute that metabolic pathway. It physically redirects the breakdown of tryptophan, converting it instead into kynurenic acid, which is a potent anti-inflammatory compound.
Wow. The paper also noted that exercise changes the actual makeup of your white blood cells.
It does. Regular, intense physical activity shifts your overall T-cell profile. Over time, our bodies accumulate senescent, exhausted memory T-cells that just take up space and secrete inflammatory signals. Exercise flushes those out.
So it's like a military general finally retiring the exhausted, cynical veterans who are just taking up space in the barracks and complaining so they can recruit fresh, naive cadets who are actually eager to fight new battles.
That is a perfect visualization. You are optimizing the deployment of your immune resources.
To round out the lifestyle toolkit, The paper dives into two highly specific hacks that I really wouldn't have expected. The first is vaccines, specifically the shingles vaccine, the VZV vaccine.
Yes, this one surprises a lot of people.
The paper argues that getting this vaccine actively slows down biological aging.
Right.
Why would an immunization do that?
It comes down to latent viral infections. After you get chickenpox as a child, the varicella zoster virus never actually leaves your body. It hides dormant in your nerve roots.
He was waiting.
Exactly. As your immune system weakens with age, the virus constantly tries to wake up and replicate, and your immune system has to constantly fight it back down. This creates a continuous, low-grade inflammatory battle.
And the vaccine stops that.
Right. The shingles vaccine heavily reinforces your immune response, effectively suppressing that virus so deeply that the immune system doesn't have to waste energy constantly skirmishing with it. It removes a chronic irritant from your biological radar.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, the second unexpected hack is cold water immersion, plunging into an ice bath. The review points out that a brief, sharp shock of cold water does more than just wake you up. It transiently mobilizes natural killer cells.
It's a powerful stimulus.
But how does freezing water physically move immune cells around?
Well, the mechanism is a survival response. The extreme thermal shock of the cold water triggers a massive, immediate surge of noradrenaline and adrenaline from your nervous system.
Like a fight or flight response.
Exactly. That sudden spike in catecholamines chemically signals your natural killer cells, which are often resting along the margins of your blood vessels, to detach and flood into the main circulation, preparing the body for potential trauma.
Wow, just flooding the system.
Yeah, it briefly supercharges immune surveillance while simultaneously spiking anti-inflammatory cytokines to prevent overreaction. Though the paper strongly warns that older adults need to approach this cautiously due to the cardiovascular shock.
Yeah, definitely consult a doctor before jumping in an ice bath.
Absolutely.
So what does this all mean? We've covered a massive amount of cellular ground today. We've explored the Paul Revere of the immune system pulling the alarm and causing pyroptosis.
We covered a lot, yeah.
We've looked at experimental pharmaceutical drugs like RRX-001 that might soon act as precise, universal off switches for a multitude of age-related diseases. And we've detailed how vitamin D, sealing mitochondrial leaks with omega-3s, caloric restriction, mindfulness-altering epigenetics, and combined physical training can all achieve the exact same goal molecularly.
It all connects.
Right. The core takeaway is that there is absolutely no single magic bullet for inflammaging. Whether it's a future prescription pad or a Mediterranean diet, they are all just tools designed to fight the exact same cellular fire.
And this raises an important question for anyone listening today. What does your personal immunofitness protocol look like? The evidence overwhelmingly points to the fact that an integrated approach is always going to be the most effective strategy.
You need multiple tools.
Exactly. A pharmaceutical drug might perfectly block the inflammasome, but it won't seal your mitochondrial membranes like olive oil, and it certainly won't clear out exhausted T cells from the barracks like a heavy resistance training session will.
It's about building a comprehensive overlapping defense system. And that leaves us with one final, deeply provocative thought to chew on. Something that wasn't directly answered in the research, but has been hovering over this entire conversation.
I'm curious what you took away from it.
Well, we talked about how the immune system's alarm bells, that Paul Revere inflammasome, evolved over millions of years for one specific reason, right? To protect us from acute, deadly threats in our youth, like an infected wound.
Right.
But now, because modern medicine allows us to live so long, those exact same evolutionary alarms are constantly misfiring, causing sterile inflammation, and becoming the very mechanisms that destroy our tissues in old age.
It's a paradox.
Yeah. So by aggressively trying to turn off inflammaging, are we fundamentally fighting our own evolutionary programming? And if science eventually allows us to perfectly silence that alarm using these new precision miracle drugs without accidentally dying of a random infection, what is the absolute biological limit of the human lifespan?
That is the ultimate question.
It really is. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep learning, and stay curious. We'll catch you next time.